What's up, locals? It's Mike and Kenzie coming to you live from the 775. Now, before we get into this episode, we have one small request. Please be sure to like and subscribe wherever you watch or listen. Now, let's get into it.
Welcome back to another episode of your favorite locals. We are joined by a very dear friend, the craftiest DIY queen I know, an Irish jig professional, and former LDS member, Emily McHale. Welcome to your favorite locals podcast.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Where this podcast stemmed from, this episode, is that we were inspired by the reality TV show, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And we were talking about this when it had come out, and you had mentioned that you grew up Mormon, which he had no idea. I feel like I had remnants of that, but I did not.
I get that reaction a lot.
Yes.
People think they can spot an ex-Mormon in a big group of people, but I don't think that's true anymore, especially nowadays, because there's just so much diversity.
Yeah.
And, there's LDS members from all over, so it's not the cookie cutter Mormon look anymore. And,
right. Which is super interesting, because that's what the reality TV show kind of highlighted, where, I think it's changed over the years. Like, my whole mom's side of the family was Mormon. The only person that's still Mormon in my inner circle of family is my grandma. Mm-hmm. But everyone on, second cousins, third cousins, they're all Mormon on my mom's side, except for my mom, my uncle, and my aunt. So, I've had a lot of teachings, I feel like, that were stemmed from the Mormon church just because of how they grew up. But that's, where we wanted to talk about today is just the reality of what it's like growing up Mormon. The true reality, not the dramatized reality TV show, but what it actually is like.
Yeah. No.
And then also leaving the church.
Maverick wants to say hi.
Your guys' assistant's really cute.
Yes.
Fired.
He's the star of the show.
He is. He's also fired. He gets in the way a lot. He whines.
Hi.
So
Hi.
with Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, how accurate is that versus how dramatized and built up into reality TV would you say it is?
Yeah, so kind of like we just mentioned, there's not that cookie cutter image anymore of, the girl from Utah or the guy from Utah who's good looking and young and devout. I think just like any other religion, there's people, you can be Christian and not go to church every Sunday, but you celebrate Christmas or you celebrate Easter.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think when it comes to Mormonism, or as they like to be referred to now, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or LDS for short. So I'm going to try my very best to refer as LDS, just to be respectful for your family members that are LDS and mine as well. But you can be, for LDS members, it's so devout and the rules are so strict, it seems kind of like an all or nothing thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of how I've always viewed it. Like, you're either a practicing LDS member or you're not. Mm-hmm. And I think there's this gray area where, there's people that grew up Catholic and still, go to Catholic church every once in a while. And I think with the show, they're not a total accurate portrayal of the perfect Mormon anymore, that cookie cutter, image of what we think, because they still read the Book of Mormon, they still go to church, but, they might drink coffee or drink alcohol from time to time. And I think just that, that stigma is changing.
What are the rules? I have an idea of don't drink coffee, don't drink alcohol, don't do drugs, no premarital sex. But is there a hard and fast rule that you're given as a child and kind of learn throughout the church?
Yeah, so I think the basis of it is it's a Church of Christ, so the 10 Commandments, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I think, based on the 10 Commandments, the LDS members have kind of created these other set of rules that other churches don't have, that they get kind of scrutinized for. And that's, like you just mentioned, the no premarital sex, no drinking coffee, no alcohol, no, substances like any kind of drugs, no weed. And I think all those rules is what makes the church what it is. It's not just a religion. It's a way of life. It's a culture. It consumes every aspect of your day-to-day life. Is this bubble with the people that have these same values as you. Mm-hmm. And when you're practicing as a member of the LDS Church, if you're keeping up with all the standards and you're able to go into the temple and take the sacrament and wear your garments, because you have to be worthy and keep all those rules in order to do a lot of the most sacred things in the church, like get married in the temple. If you have premarital sex with your fiance, even if you grow up the perfect LDS member, if you, screw up, mess up that one time and have premarital sex, and because of the way the church is, you feel guilty about it, and you go and talk to your bishop and you tell your bishop that you made that mistake, you're not worthy to get married in the LDS temple anymore. It's a privilege.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's very tight. Is there like a forgiveness outlet there? Is there a way to work your way back in, or is it like, no, you're impure, you're not welcome in the temple anymore?
Yeah, I think that opens up a whole can of worms, because the big thing is they create a lot of fear of keeping up with these rules and following these rules. Like, this is the true church. Live this way. You don't, like, if you make these don't make these mistakes. Like, learn from the mistakes of others. You don't need to make these mistakes firsthand, because, like, this is the true church. And if you do happen to make a mistake, you can, there's a whole process of repentance, and you go to your bishop and you talk to them about, what sin that you've committed. And from there, they help you kind of through prayer and, like, discipline, like, repair that relationship with God. Like, you pray, you ask God for forgiveness, and then from there, and then you promise not to do it again is another really important part of it. So there is room for forgiveness. And I think another important part when it comes to this bishop kind of member relationship, it's supposed to be confidential. And I think where a lot of kind of hurt and judgment comes from, like a lot of ex-members, is a lot of times when you make a mistake, it gets out. The bishop tells his wife, he tells his counselors, then their kids over here. And so all of a sudden, all of your whole community is judging you about this mistake you made. So I think that's where the church kind of could do better, is keeping it more confidential and focusing on just the relationship with God instead of, like, letting that judgment side come in. And that's where that shame comes from, I think, where a lot of people have those resentful feelings as ex-members.
Oh, 100%.
What is it like growing up LDS? Like, schooling, education? I feel like there's a separate education that you're getting beyond, like, public school or private school. You have LDS school as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a way of life. Like, you grow up LDS and you go to church every Sunday, and then you have mutual when you turn 12. You have these it's like activities weekly with, other kids your age, and you do fun things, and it strengthens those relationships with other members that are your age, and there's a lot of structure to it. And again, it really is, it shapes you who you are, and your whole surrounding, your friends, your family friends, it builds such a community. And I think that is such a great part of the church. And you go to seminary, every morning before you go to high school. And then, you go to...
So you did do that?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So my mom was talking about seminary, and I think her older sister, my aunt, my uncle, they had to do that, but she didn't have to do that as much when she was in high school. But she did talk about that, which I think is just so crazy, because you're waking up, 5:30 a.m., 6 a.m. You're going to this whole preschool. Not preschool, but before you go to actual public school. And you did go to public school, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So you did that for all 4 years. And then was there like a graduation at the end when you became a senior where you had to take tests out of that?
No, it's pretty informal. I think their goal with this is before you go out and into, like, the outside world, I guess, because, there's not, like, it's not like private LDS schools, how there's like private Catholic schools. So this is their way to like have you start your day focused on the church to kind of carry you throughout the rest of your day and like kind of keep, I guess, like God and Jesus in the back of your mind so that you have those tools to like be righteous all day, I guess. To be honest, I wasn't great at going to seminary. I'm not a morning person, and I did really good like my first 2 years, and then I fell off the boat. Seminary is a requirement. It's kind of pass or fail, and it's all attendance based. So it is a requirement to get into an LDS school,
like
college.
BYU or any of those. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the attendance requirement? Is it 5 days a week, 6 days a week?
It's pretty flexible. They just want they're trying to have you prove that you're devout, and when you get to BYU, the big thing is like if you have to go to church. If you grew up LDS and you get into BYU, if you don't go to church, I think like 3 out of 4 Sundays a month, you could get dropped by the university.
Wow.
Oh, wow. So it's very, very strict, it sounds like. What were some of the rules growing up that were instilled in you? Like, when did you start practicing your faith as a child?
Yeah, I think so my mom, to give a little background, my mom grew up in Provo, Utah, and her whole family, she's the youngest of 5 children, and all of her siblings and her parents, they grew up in Utah for generationally. So she was really strict. So when I grew up, that kind of shaped my childhood because she had very high standards and expectations for my siblings and I. My dad was a convert, so that means when he was in high school, the missionaries knocked on his door when he was 16, 17, and he had a more, strained family relationship. He didn't have a strong relationship with his parents or his sibling. They just didn't have a very good family dynamic. So he found that in the church, and I've talked to him about it. That's why he converted. So my parents met at BYU. My dad served a mission in Australia. But I'd say we were stereotypical, LDS family with all the rules.
Wow.
I wasn't allowed to date before I was 16 is another thing. As I got older in high school and I kind of strayed away from the church a little bit and made more friends outside of the church. Like my mom, if she caught wind we were going to a high school party, even though I wasn't going to drink, like I still didn't drink, but I was like, I still wanted to go to a high school party.
Right.
Even that's frowned upon, is putting yourself like in that,
temptation's way. Interesting.
Wow.
What is dating like?
They encourage you to date other LDS members, of course. Again, they want you to be friends with other LDS members. It's kind of, you really do live in this bubble, and they want you to keep, your core people in this bubble and with they say like the same standards as you have, so that you're not tempted to like break those standards. So dating, I don't think I ever dated anyone LDS. I did date someone that wasn't LDS, but they were very respectful of like, they knew the standards.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of LDS members where I grew up. Like the church was in San Diego. There's a lot of Mormons in San Diego.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. There's little pockets. Like there's a lot in Vegas. There's a lot in Reno. San Diego, Los Angeles, a little bit. Obviously, Utah, Idaho, a lot of LDS members in Idaho. So there's, the church is more popular in like, just certain areas, especially the West Coast, I would say.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
of Utah's influence.
Well, you can thank the Mormons for Vegas existing as it is today. Like they came all the way out. They built, I don't know if they built a temple or a mission originally, but it was like a steadfast area that people could stop for resources, food and water in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
And then when the mob took over, the mob kind of purchased all that property from them and was like, we're going to start gambling here. Get out.
That's a big change there. Yeah, it's like polar opposites. The Mormons actually helped found Nevada too. Genoa, which is the oldest settlement in Nevada, was like founded by the LDS Church.
Oh, I didn't know it was founded by the LDS Church.
Yeah,
That's
if you drive through
crazy.
Genoa, there's a lot of signs and stuff that's giving the respect to the LDS Church, because they did just all of Nevada as a whole.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah, this whole territory from like Utah, Arizona, parts of California. We were watching a documentary about it.
Yes, yeah.
Like when LDS had moved from New York and then Ohio, and then they got pushed west with Brigham Young, they'd carved out this entire territory that used to be Mexico. And what I was reading is that when like the degenerates would come through, because everybody was coming west, so you'd get like the drunkards, the gamblers, the prostitution, they would kick them out towards Nevada in the desert because they had established Provo and Salt Lake City and Ogden and that whole like trifecta area.
Yeah.
That was like, no, we're so far developed, you guys are not going to fuck this up for us. So they kept kicking everybody in towards Nevada, which is where you get like the gambling culture. And everybody went to start mining instead. So
it's crazy how much the LDS Church, their history intertwines with like our country's history, because like they did. They were pilgrims. They had to move around, and they got a lot of hate and ridicule, and had to flee for their lives.
Yeah,
travel across the whole country. Like it's crazy to think about.
But weren't they getting ridiculed also for like practicing polygamy? Like, wasn't that a huge part of? Because in the documentary that we were watching, that's a huge part of why they were moving out west, was because they were going to be, what's it called when you're put on like the stake? Persecuted when you're put on the stake to die. But they were moving out west because of that. And then when they were trying to like become their own state because they wanted to continue practicing, and the government's like, no, like you're causing trouble for us. Like, this is not good. And they were like, well, can we become our own state? And they were like trying to work out a deal. And the deal was they were going to make polygamy illegal in the United States, which wasn't illegal before, which I'm actually kind of surprised with.
1860s, there was a big beef about it. They were like, no polygamy. And
right.
Mormons were like, okay, that's fine. And then they went out to Utah and continued to practice it for like 30 years. And they're like, okay, if you guys really want to become a state, like you have to drop that. And then I think it was 1896, Utah got brought into the Union.
Okay.
So fun history facts. Yeah. All because of certain laws about multiple wives, not allowed to have. But what are the like foundational principles? I know that it is part of Christianity, but outside of that, they've got, Joseph Smith and then Brigham Young. There's like secondary beliefs on top of Christianity that they have.
Yeah.
Can you kind of break that down for us?
Yeah, I think, like we're talking about the history of it, Joseph Smith, everyone knows that name now. But I think he created this church. He claimed to find the golden plates and get visited by the angel of Moroni, who, helped him create and translate the Book of Mormon, what is now the Book of Mormon. So I think the biggest kind of fundamental belief there is Mormons believe in the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Book of Mormon is just the newest testament of God. It's just like the sequel. It's the third book in the series.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to shit on anything, but I find it very funny to have one old document and then a new document, and you're interpreting the old document with the Book of Mormon like side by side with the Bible. And I didn't really understand, like, okay, we have another testament, basically, is what you're saying. This is the latest chapter.
They like another one is that LDS members like to be referred to as like the restored church of Jesus Christ. So they're still a church of Christ, just like the sequel. It's like taking all of those core Christian values and just building off that. And again, that's why I think like based off the 10 Commandments, there's all these other rules and, ways of life based off of that.
Yeah, I think like the main focus of like the differences of the Mormon church and like other faiths like Christianity or Catholicism, because we were kind of looking at a side by side of like, what is the difference between, the Catholic Church and the Christian Church or Protestant? And I think with Mormons or LDS, something that my mom had mentioned is that the Holy Ghost God and Jesus are three different entities, whereas Christians, like Protestants, believe that it's all one. And so like just even that difference alone, but it's just like little things like that that are scattered throughout the teaching. But I think the biggest thing is what you keep mentioning is the way of life and how you interact in your daily life. And there's all this pressure to, live up to these strict rules every single day.
Yeah.
My mom was talking about how dating was like a huge one. I think like dating and, having sex before marriage in all faiths is probably like, a number one discussion topic, but you couldn't even hold hands, like no pecks, no kissing. And, the caffeine, like no alcohol, was there any point when you were growing up where you started to see other people, because you went to public school and you're seeing other people, your friends are probably engaging in some of that stuff, they're exploring. Did you ever notice a point where you're like, oh, they're different or I'm different?
That's a really good point. I think when I was 12, my parents got divorced and my dad stopped practicing being Mormon. And from there, my mom got even stricter. Like she didn't want my dad's influence to influence like my siblings and I and have us break away from the church as well. So she almost like held on tighter. And my sister is still LDS, and my brother immediately was like, oh, we don't have to follow these rules anymore. Okay, I'm not doing this.
Interesting.
And I think from there, that kind of popped that bubble where I kind of noticed the outside world more. And also, I think what really shaped my experience growing up LDS and kind of moved me away from the church a bit was the impact that my parents' divorce had on me within the church. So all these people that like I was friends with for my entire life and their parents, like we were the gossip. Everyone was talking about us and talking about my dad and judging my family and treating me different. And like I wouldn't get invited to sleepovers or to things anymore. I was getting excluded because divorce in the LDS Church is actually the divorce rates are way lower than like outside the church. So not that like my mom or anyone did anything wrong, but it just kind of there's a lot of negativity, and because of that, I kind of moved to outside friends that weren't LDS and weren't judging me or treating me differently. And also were like, how are you doing? Like, weren't afraid to talk about this big taboo that had like changed my entire life.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of was the breaking point for me.
That is very interesting because that is a similar story to my mom, my aunt, my uncle, where their mom, my grandma, also got a divorce. And so she was raising 3 children as a single mother. And so that's what your mom ended up doing. And I think there's like that dichotomy that you're now living in where there's these strict rules of how to, have a cohesive family unit in the house. And it's very family oriented, very dominated in a family oriented mindset. So I can only imagine that was really hard, as a 12-year-old. Well, first your brain is still developing and now you're moving into puberty. And so there's just, you're moving into like this exploration phase of your teenage years. And now you're part of this community that it's really all you've ever known to be your tight-knit community family in a sense, because you guys refer to each other as like sister and brother. So I can only imagine that was like really hard and probably traumatizing a little bit.
Yeah.
As a child.
I think it shaped me who I am now. And also I don't have any, gripes or hard feelings against the church. Like there's a lot of positives and negatives. So that was a big breaking point, and I was very angry about it for a long time. But I think both growing up LDS and also like my exodus of kind of having those beliefs kind of have shaped me who I am. So, I don't hold any grudges or anything. It's just the way it was. And there's a lot of good and not so great people in the church. And I had some people that were even better friends and just some that weren't. So it's definitely a mixed bag.
That makes sense. It's people at the end of the day, like whether it's in LDS or Catholicism or no religion whatsoever. Some people suck just across the board. So with your exodus from the church, were you kind of bummed that you didn't get to go on mission?
That's a good question. So I was just talking to my sister about this because right around the time I went to college, and my sister mom actually really wanted me to go to BYU, Idaho. And I ended up going to University of Nevada, Reno, obviously. But
good old Nevada, where the Mormons are like, get out of our states and go to Nevada.
Yeah, I went all the way back, full circle, I guess, there, right back to Nevada where they got kicked out of. But that was another huge, key point because, I would not be where I am today if I would have gone to BYU, Idaho. I would have been a completely different person. Probably would be married and have 3-4 children by now.
Yeah.
So right around that time when I was 18, they changed the age requirement for girls serving a mission. So when I grew up, it was mostly guys serving a mission, and they go right out of high school or when they're 19. So sometimes they do a year of school and then they go and they get their mission call. And for girls, if you wanted to serve a mission, it was 21. So there's, more time there. You go to college and you're in your third year of university and then you decide you want to go serve a mission. So it's more upsetting of your life because you're already almost done with college at this point. So for guys, I think that's another thing with the LDS Church is it's so much different growing up as a girl versus a boy because and it's, different pressures in different ways. And for guys, I always, especially the older I got, kind of felt bad because there's so much pressure on them to serve a mission. And if you don't, everyone thinks something's wrong, that you sinned, that you did something bad, and you get a lot, and you can't hide that. If you don't serve a mission, everyone's like, what's wrong? It's a big red flag. And I don't know if that's still the case, but I know a lot of guys that went to serve a mission because they felt like they had to, and they were gone a month, 2 months, 6 months, and came back, which is also they just decided, no, I can't do this.
Damn.
Wow.
It's terrible. And I think as a girl, we did not have that pressure, and I never was really tempted to or inclined to. And then they changed the age requirement from 21 for girls to 19, so they could go at the same time. And my sister was saying she loves that. And she had BYU professors that loved that because then it helped kind of change the dynamic of girls weren't getting married so young.
Yeah.
Girls weren't 18 getting married to 22-year-old returned missionaries. Because when you're a guy and you're on your mission, you learn almost all these sales tactics. You're really good at talking to people, to getting people to convert to this religion. And my sister was saying, these returned missionaries to a lot of these young girls, they'd kind of be like, we should get married. You should pray to God about it. And if you get a good feeling, they would use those missionary conversion tactics to help them get married in a way. They would use that same kind of psychology, I guess.
That is craziness. And it's probably older than 22, I would imagine, too, sometimes. Do you think it's 24, 25s going after 18-year-olds, or is it average, 22-year-olds that are coming back from missionary?
I think it just depends. I think, my mom got married when she was 19, and my dad was 22.
Okay, so that seems to be the
yes,
the
but
age
now it's gone
difference.
pushed back. So now more girls and guys are a little bit older, which I think is great because a lot of these kids, they're still kids, didn't even get a full dating experience. They haven't dated that many people.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can't have, premarital sex, so they want to have sex, so they get married really young, and they don't know how to have a relationship.
Yeah.
I feel in that show, the lives of the Mormon, the secret lives of the Mormon wives, I feel there's so much immaturity, and a lot of the marriages there, they're not good marriages because they got married so young and they didn't learn how to be in a good relationship.
Yeah, they can't recognize toxic versus what's healthy. It seems in that show. And I don't know how much of it was drama just for the sake of the show, but it did seem like there was a couple relationships in there where the man was very domineering to his wife, and all the girls were trying to back her up and say, hey, like, this isn't right. And so that kind of leads me into my next question about like the gender roles that they kind of teach you about growing up. Mm-hmm. Did you feel like there was pressure to be a certain way as a woman? Did they even talk about career as an option, or was it more pressure to be a wife and a mom and that was it? Like, was there gender differences in how they treated the men and women?
Yeah, I think gender roles are a really big part of the LDS Church. And looking back, that's probably my like biggest gripe, because they really do instill in you from a young age, like what's your role in the family, and like who do you want to be? How do you want to make yourself in the person that you want to become to be a good wife? So church used to be 3 hours, and the first hour was, everyone's all together in a ward, and it's the bishop, and it's like you're all congregated together. And then from there you break away into classes for like the second and third hour, and it's based on your gender and your age. And when you turn, I think it's 12, you enter something called Young Women's. And then boys have a equivalent of that. But from there, you're just grouped with like 12 to 14, 14 to 16, and then 16 to 18. Mm-hmm. And you're all together too, and then they, break it up in age from there as well. But you stand up every single Sunday in Young Women's, and there's this, what's it called? It's like the personal progress proclamation. And it's saying, I promise to be, a good, follow all of these, like have faith and have like be worthy, and you stand up and you recite this same thing every single week, so it's like instilled in you. And we'd also have like from there, so again, like that kind of shapes it, like you're literally standing up and you're
Are you saying
reciting.
I'm going to be like a good daughter, a good sister?
Yes.
Are you saying like I'm going to be a good mother someday? Like,
yeah, it's like I proclaim to follow all the rules and withhold all the standards so I can be a good daughter and, carry the church with me, carry God with me. And I think part of that is shaping the way for you to be like a good wife,
right?
Like not,
right.
Obedient. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Be obedient. And from there as well, like we would have lessons or activities where they would like, we were like 13 or 14, like, what do you want? Picture your future husband and like what qualities does he have? Like, let's make a wedding scrapbook. Like they were instilling in us like you need to be holy, and a big part of it is not have premarital sex, because no one's going to want to marry you if you break that covenant. There's this analogy that and like it's kind of controversial, but if you have a fresh stick of gum and someone chews it, you think someone else is going to want that gum later?
Damn.
Yeah, so that is like that. I mean, when you put it in that terms, it's like nasty. It's like, no, I don't want your chewed up gum.
Yeah.
So that's probably what you're thinking. Like,
they use that philosophy,
wow.
Especially at this church camp. It's called EFY, and it's from when you're 14 to 18. You go every summer, and it's all over the country. Like I went to Utah, I went to Santa Barbara to do it. Like it's really fun, and it's with girls and guys, and it's like this youth camp for a week. And especially there, they would talk about like, you need to stay worthy, or no, like your husband's not going to want to marry you. Like it's your job to like, to be where, like also the modesty thing, I guess I would say, like you need to dress modest to protect the minds of the young men around you. Like it's your responsibility to like help the men not make bad choices. So kind of belittling the girls. Yeah.
So like comical, because I think that's also in other faiths as well. I just think that
it's like you can't show shoulder.
Right.
How distracting that is.
Yeah. Like the spaghetti straps. You remember the spaghetti straps?
Yeah.
Getting in trouble for that, or like having your knuckles be how long your shorts had to be on you when you put your hands down. That's really funny. So, okay, so there's obviously like so many strict rules that you had growing up, whether it was with dating or, partying, being curious about certain things. I think you touched on it at the beginning. That creates so much guilt and shame, which I can, kind of relate to with me growing up Christian, is I felt a lot of guilt and shame within the church because they're telling you not to do things. And, I go to public school where most of my friends are not at this church. And I'm like, but I have experimented with that, or I have done that. Now I'm a bad person. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the message just wasn't clear, because I think at the end of the day, these rules are meant to have you be your highest self so that you can have this very clear, holy relationship with God, which really isn't bad when you look at it in that sense. Like what they're trying to instill, the intention is good, but I think the result, the reality of it is that it creates such guilt and shame that is so traumatizing for people, because you look at yourself as dirty, you look at yourself as unclean and unworthy, which can have really long lasting effects, whether it's in friendships or relationships. So did you feel guilt and shame at all growing up? When you left the church, did you feel guilt and shame? Like, do you still carry any of those feelings, and how do you cope with them if you do?
Yeah, I like to think that I don't anymore, but I still do in little ways, and it's shown. And I've even gone to therapy at different points in my life to try and get over it and like talk through it and face it head on, to move past it. But I think especially in high school, when I was moving away from the church, I had this great young women's leader. She was amazing. She was like the president of all the young women, and we had a really good relationship, and she was super supportive and loving and not judgmental. And she's still to this day like one of the most amazing people I've ever met. And she told my mom once, she's like, Emily can't, like I was talking to Emily the other day, and she won't look me in the eye. Like she's acting weird. Like, and I think I felt like I was letting her down. And going to church, I felt uncomfortable, and I felt like, everyone knew that maybe I tried alcohol or kissed a boy or whatever it might have been. I felt like everyone knew, and I felt that shame and a lot of guilt. And I think from there, it spirals you. Like you get deeper and deeper in that guilt. And I think like through my junior and senior year of high school, I was really depressed, honestly. Mm-hmm. And even my mom was like, why aren't you on it? Like you're not as happy as you used to be. And I think a lot of that stems from like I felt like less of a person because I wasn't living by all these standards anymore, and also because I knew I might not want to be LDS anymore, and I felt a lot of guilt just because of that as a whole as well.
What was it like leaving LDS?
Honestly, I think it was hard in high school because I was right there with my mom. We have a great relationship now, but just because of everything that had happened with my dad leaving the church and then my brother, she was really holding on tight and really wanted me to go to BYU, Idaho, her and my sister both, because they knew that would be a turning point. Mm-hmm. And so it was really hard at that time, like at the junior, senior year, kind of that pivotal moment, just like that time's really hard for anyone. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that just put more pressure on me of what I really wanted to do and what I was trying to do to make other people around me happy. And I asked myself that question, and I talked to my mom and my dad about it and kind of got, their point of views, and they were more than happy to give me their opinions about it. But at the end of the day, I did make the decision that I made. And once I got to UNR and out of the house and made amazing friends like you guys freshman year of college, like that's when it got so much better. And like I just wasn't in that same environment where I felt like I was letting everyone down around me.
So that really wasn't that long ago though, if you think like, because I mean that was 18 at the age of 18, right?
A decade ago.
I mean,
Yeah.
That's so
I guess
crazy
like
to
it's,
say.
I mean, yes, a decade ago, but I think it's still fresh enough for you where you remember that feeling. And if you think about it, you were practicing LDS more than you haven't been practicing LDS.
Yeah, no, I've never thought about it that way. That's true.
And so it seems like a lot of the teachings, though, that you grew up with and the exposure that you had in the church, you've said it's shaped you and who you are today. And I think even though there's been a lot of guilt and shame and there's these strict rules, I also think that the Mormon Church, LDS, I'm gonna keep messing this up, but there's also some good that has influenced you because, like I said at the beginning of this, you are the craftiest person that I know. You have this artistic eye that is very natural to you. It comes natural to you in the way that you dress, in the way that you think of projects. You love to bake your own bread, like those, like just things like that where it's not like that doesn't come like natural to me. And when I was talking with my mom, she said that from a young age, the church does influence you to find that creative passion, whether that is musically or artistically, theater, whatever it is. My mom played the piano in the church, and so she was doing all of that kind of stuff. My grandma was the conductor, she was saying, and I was like, what? But do you think that the church did have any kind of influence in maybe pulling that artistic side of you out?
Yeah, and I think kind of what we talked about, like the negativities of them, like growing, raising you to be a good wife. A lot of ways, like that's a little backwards. I know it's turned a little bit from that, and they're more inclusive gender-wise now. But I think there's also some positives to that because you're encouraged to be well-rounded and have these skills and be maternal. And we'd also have activities where we would, learn how to make wontons or learn how to make bread, or like it does make you a very well-rounded person with lots of skills. Like, another thing too, they want you to have hobbies and like that brings you together and like it brings the community together, helps you make friends. So I think like that is an important part of it. Another thing too, I think every LDS girl out there, active or inactive, can do a killer French braid, and I think that's a universal thing. Like all Mormons know how to, braid your hair.
Oh my gosh,
at the sleepover, I was that girl. For especially my non-Mormon friends, like they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, can you braid my hair? Can you braid my hair?" So
yeah,
that's how you can spot an ex-LDS member.
Great braiding skills.
Yes, ask them to braid your hair and see how it goes.
That's so funny. So how do you spot an ex-LDS member, or how do you know if someone's Mormon just in conversation? Like, it seems like you've said that a couple times now where we literally like did not know until you shared it with us. And I was like, whoa, what? Like that, it is very surprising. So how do you spot former LDS members?
It's funny because I really can't all the time.
Yeah.
And the older I get too, and like I heard someone that I knew through the grapevine grew up LDS, and I would have never guessed. Like same, I have that reaction too. And some people are easier to spot than others. Even when I moved away from it, starting like end of high school or went to college and would tell my new friends that I grew up LDS, they're like, "Oh my gosh, really? I would have never guessed that."
Yeah.
So I think it is kind of hard to spot, and I'd say it can be hard or it can be obvious and kind of a really sad way, I think, because I know a lot of ex-LDS members now who were so engrossed in the church and used to be, the cookie cutter perfect, Molly Mormon girl, and now they're the polar opposite. Like maybe like all the more power to them, but maybe they do OnlyFans, or maybe they got married really young and they're, I'm like, that doesn't seem like a very happy marriage to me. But I mean, who could I know? That's just my, looking in from an outside perspective. But I think when you grow up in such a strict kind of, with these guidelines in your childhood, a lot of people will just polar opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go full rebel.
Go full rebel. And I think that's another way you could actually possibly spot an ex-LDS member, is someone that maybe is still rebelling and doing literally being the furthest person they can from what that LDS standard is.
Yeah. I think that it can also be related to having like really strict parents. Like you always notice the kids that had the really strict parents because
What? Never.
yeah, because then they just like go even harder in the paint on all the rebellion. But we were talking about it. I feel like you and I, or maybe I was talking about it with my mom. I talked to my mom a lot about it this week. So, but that the strict rules that you have, especially as a guy, if you are going into the priesthood, which I think is, you're calling it bishop, the bishop. So is that similar, the priesthood and then bishops?
Yeah, the priesthood has a couple different meanings, I guess, within the LDS Church. Priesthood is like kind of depending where you are geographically and what church building you're going to go to, what time, you have this set group of people that you go to church with. It's probably anywhere from like around 50 to 200 people, depending on where you are, how big the church building is, how many members are in that area. But we had a really big church building, and we would go, we'd get our set time, and they would change the zones too. So depending where you live, you'd go to a certain church building and whatnot. And depending on that, you have the priesthood, which is like the bishop who's in charge of your ward, which is that, that set time that you go. And then from there, he has counselors, like first counselor, second counselor. And it's, I think it changed. I don't know if that changes yearly, or like every 2 or 3 years, but it does change. And it's like a calling. So within the church, everyone has like a job, a calling. So whether it's a Sunday school teacher, so you are in charge of giving lessons to, 8 to 10-year-olds after that main big church meeting. Someone will get called as the bishop, and you're like the leader of that ward, I guess.
Yeah, that my grandma, I think, is a Sunday school teacher for like kids in kindergarten or first grade or something like that. I remember going over to her house, and she had all these like crafts laid out that her kids did. But yeah, going back to the priesthood, the reason why I brought it up is because I think you're supposed to be either celibate or like you're held to like a different standard while you're going through the priesthood. Is that correct?
Okay. See, this is, so when there's two versions of it. So priesthood is like, it's that kind of leadership within the ward, but the priesthood is also this idea, it's called like a, sorry, I'm explaining this really poorly.
No.
It's like a, almost like a power that male members have to do like good with. It's like it's like a spiritual power, I guess I would define it as. It's like an extra insight relationship with God. And with this priesthood, I believe once you're 12, you kind of get more indoctrined into it. With this priesthood, it's called the priesthood power. So it is like a spiritual power. And you have to be strong in the priesthood, like strong in the faith. You have to be worthy. So like to hold the priesthood, you have to, be keeping all the rules. And with the priesthood, like you can do a lot of amazing things in the eyes of the LDS. So like if someone's sick, like say someone's has pneumonia and they're very terminally ill, a couple men from the ward will volunteer to like go give that person a priesthood blessing, where they sit that person down and they'll all circle around him, put their hands on their head, and give them a special it's essentially a prayer, but they're using that sacred priesthood power to hopefully like heal them. Yeah.
Interesting.
Have God heal them.
Yeah.
But like they're the conduit for it, I guess.
Which is kind of similar to like Catholicism with like the Pope and
kind of. So I grew up Catholic, and there's all these goofy ass rules in Catholicism. And so my parents also split at 12. That's when I stopped going to Catholic school. And I was like, this is awesome. I love life now. But there were so many goofy like steps that we would go through. And it's very ritualistic in a way that it's very like tied into old world Latin style history, like Roman Catholic. And like the anointing of the sick that we were talking about. So there's 7 sacraments in Catholicism. and I've gone through 5 of them. And like one of them is anointing the sick. And I remember we had to go to our priest and have him bless oil and then also bless water to make it holy water. And then go to like somebody who's ill in the hospital who's also Catholic and like make the sign of the cross on their forehead with this oil and then spray them with holy water.
Oh my gosh, the spray with holy water. That just brings up like all the vampire movies.
Yes. And imagine being like a young child with another child going like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, what is this?
Oh my
You're touching
gosh.
wrinkly old heads
Yeah.
and you're just doing the cross on them.
Yeah. So
Oh my gosh.
you go through these goofy sacraments that I did not like Catholicism. I thought it was a little too structured for me. And moving away from that into like a Protestant style Christianity, I was like, oh, there's less rules and there's less people to go through. Like there's a lot of conduits of God versus like the Christian approach of, no, you have a relationship with God. That was like a big, I guess, shift because we had confession. Did you guys, like, you would confess something to a bishop,
To
right?
a bishop, which is the equivalent.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I wasn't a fan of that because I'm like, why can't I talk to God directly? Why does a weird old guy in the corner have to hear me out? This is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know where I was going with that, but
Well, I think it's a good segue into bringing it back to the priesthood that I was
Yeah, no,
trying
the
to talk
priesthood's
about.
really, I think it's a really core, you asked earlier, like, what are, like, the core kind of Mormon practices? And I think the belief in the priesthood, like, is that, for sure.
Yeah.
that structure.
And only guys can have it. That's another thing. Which, I mean, but like you said, growing up Catholic, I think that's a lot of hierarchy in all churches is male dominated. So that's not Mormon specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's more power specific.
Yeah.
It's just like, let's just
Organized-
centralize this with the dudes.
Organized religion specific. Yeah. I think that with all of these rules that you can find across, most faiths, this very strict, rigid way of living, it also creates like a suppression within yourself where you're not freely able to explore and experiment or even really like think for yourself in a way. Like it's kind of taking that agency away from you. And so with that also comes like this huge rebellion, but you're also seeing it, maybe not in the best way where it can actually be super toxic to other people, like different scandals that have come out, not just with like LDS, but with across all churches, mostly the Catholic Church.
So the Catholics have a
Yeah,
pretty bad
mostly the
rap.
Catholics. But I think that it really does come with like that suppression of like you're not supposed to date, you're not supposed to have sex before marriage, you can't drink alcohol, and so then it comes out in other ways.
Oh, are bishops allowed to get married?
Yes. Oh, yeah. So I wanted to mention that. So, because, my boyfriend, he grew up, you guys know Max, obviously.
Yeah.
Might have lived with him a couple of years. Yeah.
Sorry. I didn't
Wait,
know how
who's
to-
Max?
I know, you can cut this part out. I didn't know how to like bring that into
No, that's
the-
okay.
no,
We'll keep
way.
it in. It's a good one.
Oh my gosh. He's going to watch it and be like, what the heck?
You know this guy.
Really just asked him that.
That's funny.
But he grew up very Catholic and like I've learned so much. And I actually have gone to church with him so many times. And his mom is still a very adamant practicing Catholic. And I have talked to her a lot about it and her faith. And it has been interesting to learn about another religion. So priests, there's so many rules and they have to quit their jobs and leave their entire lives to be a priest, which I think I didn't know that. That is crazy to me, but like also mad respect. Like you're so devout, like you have so much faith, like good for you. Like if you have this calling and you're so sure, like, a lot of people aren't happy and aren't sure in what they're doing. So like mad respect to you if you're willing to, drop having a girlfriend or if you're divorced or whatever it may be to be this religiously devout and guide other people. A bishop is you don't have to sacrifice anything. You can be, most of them are married and have kids and they're like, it's just, they're just any other, and they're very like, they get called to the position for a whole array of different reasons, but mostly because they're known to be devout and be kind of like a mentor in the Mormon church.
Which the jobs that they're holding, because you had mentioned that a couple of times, like you're called to this position, right? Like it's not that they get to choose, they literally feel like they're called, is what I'm hearing, right?
So there's like a whole infrastructure of the church. So from like bishops and like wards, where it's like who you meet, or the group of people you meet with every Sunday. From there, there's like a couple wards all together in one geographic location, would be called a stake. And from there, you have a stake leader. So like there, it goes all the way up, all the way to the prophet, who
El Presidente
is pretty, yes, the president, which would be like the Pope, I guess. Or it's like the Mormon Pope. And there's a whole, and then there's like the apostle, or there's so much infrastructure. And twice a year you watch General Conference, which is in Utah, and it's where all the leaders get together and they literally just give talks to all the members. You watch it on TV. It's like they're giving, they are known to have like the best, closest relationship with God, especially the prophet, just like the Pope would. And they're just giving lessons and guidance to all the Mormons around the entire world. And from the prophet, there's whole other groups of men that help lead the church. And the prophet is the main one.
So he interprets the word of God basically for the church.
He's like talking directly to God.
Yeah. Okay. So that is the Pope.
He's like what Joseph Smith. It's like a new Joseph Smith.
So speaking of Joseph Smith, in the age of the internet, there's a lot of information that people can now pull. Some of it pretty negative about J-Dog. How do Mormons or LDS members navigate that? Because I feel like I've heard different stories of people going, yeah, there was a lot of like, we don't know about that, but the core tenets are good, so we keep those. Was that something you went through?
I love that question. Honestly, no, because my faith didn't waver because of all the controversy with Joseph Smith. Mine was more, my personal experience within the Mormon Church. With everything coming out about Joseph Smith, that was, that's been very recent, like in the last 5 years or so. So that's like after my time. But it's funny to look at because there's a South Park episode about it where there's, the LDS family and they're pulling apart the whole Joseph Smith thing and they're trying to disprove to the LDS family how untrue it is. And that's, you see that all over today. And a lot of people are going after his character too, which I agree. I do not think Joseph Smith was a good person. I think I was raised to believe and watch movies and read books about how amazing Joseph Smith was. Like he's so idolized. And now it coming out about all of his wives and a lot of them being underage. And pretty much he said, God told me you need to marry me.
Yeah.
Like, and the whole polygamy thing
really pissed a lot of people off too. It's like, hey, that was my wife, dude. What the hell?
Yeah, no, yeah. I think it's a whole different thing. And I don't think the whole church as a whole should be judged off of Joseph Smith's actions. As silly as that sounds, because he's the founder of the church. And in the Book of Mormon, there's a lot of controversy on, he didn't even translate it. Like it's been proven, like they hid pages from him and then had him retranslate it and the pages were different and like stuff like that comes up. And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
I agree with you. As much as it sounds like I'm bashing it, I want to be very clear. I think that Mormonism as a whole is like net positive good. Like they do far better things, I think, for the world, for their community. They take care of each other. It's very community oriented. So that even if it is based on some pretty goofy beliefs sometimes where I'm like, I don't know about that one, like the actual output is so positive. Yeah. So I look at that and I go, okay, there's a lot of nonsense here, but there's also a lot of nonsense in Catholicism and in other religions where you're like, okay, if the net positive is worth it, I think you can look past some of the fuckery that goes on behind the scenes. So
absolutely.
I just want to be abundantly clear that I'm not trying to dunk on LDS. I like what they're doing for the most part.
They don't need to have faith in the whole reason why the church was created. There can be holes in that because where the church is now, like, it doesn't necessarily really matter. Like, people get too lost in the facts. And at the end of the day, and I think this was the South Park episode, he's like, I don't care if Joseph Smith was lying or not. Like, it's brought me so much happiness and community and brought my family closer together. So at the end of the day, it's just nitpicking. It doesn't matter.
I was like working through a question. I had like asked it to you in my head and I was like answering it. And I think I came full circle in my head, but I'll still ask it to you. Why do you think it doesn't matter? Because I think when a faith is based off of, like, if the foundation of a reason a faith is discovered, if the foundation is crumbling, then how do you have a strong faith because of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think they realize that the creation of it isn't perfect. And even going back to like the Old and the New Testament, like so much of that was redacted and edited and changed throughout history. Like religion is history.
Yeah, it's a long game of telephone.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think you can point at any religion and say this, that like, you know, that's not true or that's not historically correct. And I just think for most people now, they get their faith and kind of that reassurance that this is the true church in other ways. And I think, like, we're talking about the Holy Ghost, so the trifecta. And the Holy Ghost's role in the Mormon church is to kind of give you guidance and also reassurance. So it's like it's a Holy Spirit that's always with you, that, you know, if you're in a store and you want to steal a candy bar, the old saying is the Holy Ghost is with you, and it's like your conscience. It's going to tell you, no, don't steal that candy bar. That candy bar it's not yours. You don't have money. Don't steal it. But from there, the Holy Ghost also, like, if you're in church and you're sitting in church on a Sunday and your bishop is saying something or, you know, telling you how true the church is or whatnot, the fuzzy feeling you get in your chest, they call it the Holy Spirit. Like, that's like the confirmation that it's the true church.
Like you're being filled with faith. You
like
can feel
faith
that.
And joy. And I think if you're in any church, you kind of get that feeling, like that kind of like it's like a peace. It's like an inner peace. And they say that's the Holy Ghost, like giving you inner peace and reaffirming that this is the true church. So I think people more go off of that day to day than like Joseph Smith, you know, discovering the golden plates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that like daily affirmation, those reminders of faith.
Yeah.
Totally. Which is, I kind of like answered in my own head because I also realized that that Mormonism or LDS is based off of, you know, Protestant Christianity as well. And so, you know, you still have those values. They still believe in Jesus. It's not like you're taking that away. So that's where I was like, I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So like with Catholics, you've got the Virgin Mary, like that story.
Right.
That's a lot of trust. Like, okay, this lady got pregnant with the Son of God, and we're going to look at everybody and be like, we're all in on this, right? And if that one thing is off, does that fuck up the rest of it? No, not really.
Yeah.
Like, there was so much of an impact outside of that. I do want to ask, where does Mary come into the Mormon story? Because I feel like you see it so prominent in Catholicism. In Christianity, not so much. I don't hear about it as much. As...
Well, Mary is definitely in Christianity, but she's not the star of the show. Like, right. Well, Jesus is the star of the show.
You don't pray to Mary in Christianity, but in Catholicism you do. She's like a separate entity.
Okay. Yeah. I'd say like it's the same story, what you just said. And there's like a lot of respect and like love for Mary. But again, the focus is mostly on Jesus. I think that brings up a good point too. LDS members don't really worship the cross, which you see in a lot of other churches. And I think that kind of ties into the Mary thing as well, is LDS members like to focus on like Jesus's life as a whole. And we do celebrate Easter, and we do think that, we think, I'm actually technically still LDS because I was baptized LDS, even though I'm not practicing. So I think that's why I'm used to saying we. But anyway, they they like to focus on the positives of Jesus's life and not really focus on his suffering as much. And they actually more focus on him going before he was crucified, going to the garden and suffering for all of our sins. Like, we definitely talk about that. But the actual, like, the crucifixion was more of men. Like, that part of the pain and him actually dying, that was more from, like, the will of men versus, like, him going and bleeding from every pore. That was him talking to God and, like, taking on all the suffering from the sin. So we like, Mormons focus more on that aspect, I guess, and, like, his life as a whole, and not really, like, worshiping the cross.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, because Catholics are very fear-oriented. Everything is, like, suffering and pain and, like, avoid all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed that difference because it's very odd.
Well, it's the same with Christianity. I think that's where Mormonism and Christianity kind of intersect, is that they focus on, like, Jesus died for our sins, and now it's this kind of, like, celebration of new life rather than being fearful that he's literally, like, bleeding everywhere. So I'm more just curious about your faith and just, like, where you currently stand. Because, you know, it's been a topic of conversation with us. He's grown up Catholic, I've grown up Christian. And when we think about where we are today with our faith, like, I don't feel like I'm a practicing Christian. I've actually had, like, a really hard time with my own identity in Christianity. And it's not because I don't believe in Jesus. It's just been, I think I've, like, experienced a lot of church hurt where I don't feel like I resonate with the church as much. Like, I resonate with my own relationship with God, and I just focus on that. But I also think the church, and whether it's, you know, the Mormon or Catholic or Christian or whatever, I think that they bring a lot of good to the family dynamic. I think it creates this guideline for how to raise kids and for kids to understand how to have faith and how to have a relationship with God. Like, I wouldn't really know how to teach if we decided to have kids. I don't know how to teach my kids about, like, God and Jesus, but we also don't actively go to church. So I'm more just curious, like, where you currently stand after leaving, because you said you're still LDS, but you're just not practicing.
Yeah.
Do you still hold a lot of the same faiths as an LDS member or former LDS member, or do you think you lean more Catholicism because of Max? Like, what are the conversations that you guys are having?
Honestly, I think it's like a burnout almost, where it was, like, took up so much of my childhood that, like, now I don't even know for myself. Like, I've thought about it a little bit, but I think just, like, approaching that kind of thought process, you can get, like, a little lost in it. Like, it's almost overwhelming. Like, I don't even know where to start. So I still, like, definitely believe in a higher power, and am a spiritual person, and, you know, believe following the 10 Commandments is, like, a good thing to do, and being a good person and not judging others. And, like, I try and, like, you know, even my thoughts, I'm like, I need to have better, more positive thoughts, especially when it comes to other people. Like, I still hold myself to a lot of those standards, like, more for myself and, like, who I want to be, versus, like, this exterior presence or, you know, religion telling me to do so. So yeah, I don't know where I stand religiously, but I would say spiritually, I think I'm pretty attuned, and I want to be a good person. And also, going back to, like, a lot of those rules, I think there's, like, I still kind of incorporate them into my life even now. Like, I see the benefit of, you know, not doing drugs, or, like, not even drinking alcohol. Like, alcohol is terrible for you. So I think there is some merit to that, and it has carried over in a lot of ways too. Yeah,
100%. Another thing that you had touched on is your parents' divorce and how your dad is no longer practicing, but then your mom got stricter. How do you navigate those conversations with people that are still LDS in your family?
Honestly, it doesn't really come up. I think it kind of did, and there was a lot of shame and a lot of, like, family drama. But what I've kind of seen is, for example, like I had a family member who went through a really unfortunate experience within the LDS Church as well. And from that, like I mentioned, my mom grew up very LDS, and it goes back generations. Her maiden name's Pulsifer, and our ancestor Zerah Pulsifer is actually mentioned in the Book of Mormon. He was like in cahoots with Joseph Smith. Like he was there for like the founding of the church. So it goes back very far. Yeah, no, it's kind of crazy.
Sweet.
That is crazy. That's some pretty deep roots in the religion.
Yeah, so I think that's why like my mom was so shaken, and it definitely took a little bit. And I think too, like her family was all like have all been Mormon, and her siblings and their kids, my cousins and stuff. But in the last 10 years, there's been not just like our experience, but similar experiences with like my cousins or my aunts and my uncles, where like the church has kind of fallen short, where something happened and members are judgmental or rude, and they're not that community that they promised to be, and there's like a lot of hurt feelings and like negative emotions. And I think because of that, I've had more family members, extended family members, leave the church. And from there, it's just made everyone more well-rounded. Like
Interesting.
Yeah, like it's like the grass is greener on the other side, and like you have more empathy when you go through kind of these hard experiences. So when you're in that like Mormon bubble and everything's perfect and like something happens to someone else, like it is easy to cast judgment on that. But I think as like time has gone on and people have made mistakes, and including like my family members, and seeing how other like LDS members have treated them because of that, it's opened a lot of eyes on like, wait, maybe this church isn't perfect. Maybe there is some problems here. And it's created, honestly, like a more loving environment. Like my aunt, when I was moving away from the church and my mom was being really hard on me, she was like, I hope you know, like I am here for you and I love you no matter what. And I know your mom is being really hard on you right now. And it's just because she loves you, and she'll get there. She'll realize that like everything's going to be okay. Like for what you mentioned, like that's just, it's not worth like griping about or fighting about. So I'd say that's kind of, and it did get there, it did get better. And I think it makes everyone more well-rounded at the end of the day.
Yes, everyone has their own relationship with God, even if it's outside of the church, because the church really is community, it seems like. And then when you take community out of it, it's your relationship with God. So what my mom, aunt, and uncle were doing is they were just instilling in my grandma, like, we still have a relationship with God and we still love Jesus. And we are going to heaven, like giving her peace of mind. And even, you know, I've had conversations with my grandma growing up about my relationship with God. And I think like it's hard to recognize that maybe anything outside of your own comfort zone, of your own locale, if you will, like you get so caught up that this is the only way, it's the right way. And so you can't even imagine anything outside of it until it literally shakes your world and you're like, wait, no, like don't go, don't leave. Like, what are you doing? And I think that is the beautiful thing about, you know, people who end up leaving religion, is that it's not about like, you know, being like, I don't love you, God, or I don't love you, Jesus, and not having a relationship. It's just having it in a different way that resonates with you. And that makes more sense. Because I think you can harbor a lot of guilt and resentment towards, you know, having a relationship with God. Isn't that like the most important thing, is to have a relationship with God? So why create this fear, guilt, and shame around that for people, and then have them end up, you know, maybe being even atheists at the end of the day? Like, I think that, I mean, I don't need to go on and on about it, but that's just what I was wondering, like with your family, if maybe that is the realization that they had to come to.
What you just said, that's what, like my mom, she didn't say like the heaven thing specifically, but you know, it was there. And I think while she's going through all that, my aunt had already gone through that. And at the end of the day, she realized, do you know what? It just matters that we love each other, and it matters like that we're there for each other. And no, none of us are going to go to hell because of this. And we just need to like be a family. That's like the most important part. So exactly what you said. I think that's the overall kind of feeling that of where we got to. And I think that's
which
important.
is so good.
Yeah.
Because that can be really hard. Like to have such a strict religion overpower your life in every aspect, and then to move away from that, but then still have family members that are in it. That just must be like just a hard, conversation to maybe navigate. But it sounds like you guys have done a really good job at coming full circle and kind of respecting each other's lifestyles and values, which is really good. I had another question around the baptism because I remember you telling me like this crazy story about being baptized for other members or family members that didn't get to be baptized in the church.
Yes, baptisms for the dead.
What?
Please explain this.
It's like the concept of it is nuts. It's crazy. Not saying that it's like weird, but it just looking back and thinking about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just, it's so niche.
Right.
It's and I see it, I get the reasoning for it, but it's still like overwhelming. So what baptisms for the dead are when you turn, I think it's when you're 14. It might be 12, you might be 14. I'm pretty sure it's when you're 14. You start doing temple work as a youth member. So you can go into the temple, but you actually don't get to go into the temple, fully into the temple, until either you get married or go on a mission. Like you have to really, you're showing like how faithful you are. You have to like, again, earn that kind of entrance into the temple. So this is just kind of a part of that. You're only allowed in like this one section of the temple to do this temple work. And what it is your whole ward, all the youth in your ward, that's 14 to 18, you go into the temple and they have a whole list of names ready for you, or you can bring in
your own list.
Yes, exactly.
A hit list of sorts.
LDS members are really big on family history, which is sorry.
Okay.
LDS members are really big on family history, which is super awesome. My sister like took a whole class on it, and now like there's a whole website of it, and it's super, super cool, and I love that. So for baptisms of the dead, if you're going through your family tree and you have an ancestor, that wasn't LDS, because it probably wasn't around then, obviously, you can take their name, and essentially it's with your body, you're getting baptized on behalf of that person that has been deceased. So the idea of
that
it
is so wild.
Yeah.
Retroactive baptism.
Exactly. You're like you're the placeholder, the conduit for this, like for the physical baptism. They dunk you with water. It's a whole baptism, but it's like it's to represent this person, or like in honor of this person. You're just the conduit. So yeah.
You get to do that multiple times?
Oh yeah, so like when you go, you do it like once every couple months is like a youth activity.
Whoa.
So you get baptized once every couple months.
It's like a regular thing. Yeah. So you have, I think they give you like 5 to 10 names. If you don't have, like for me, because my whole mother's side was LDS, our family history is good. Everyone on my mother's side that's ever existed has been baptized, because it's temple work, and it's important for members to baptize their ancestors. So whenever I went, I would get a random list of names from like the 1600s of people that lived and died, and it'd be like 5 or 6 names, and you put on these white jumpsuits, and they say their little prayer, they say the person's name, and then you get dunked in water, and then they do it again for every person. So
you're just repeatedly
getting dunked in water. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right.
Yeah.
That's different. That's very different.
And so the overarching idea of this is that there's 3 main levels of heaven. And to get into the celestial kingdom, which is the highest level of heaven, you need to be a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints. Mm-hmm. So the idea of it is we're getting baptized for them, so that they're in heaven waiting. Like the idea is like they're in heaven waiting for this moment so that they can go into the higher level of heaven, because now they've been baptized and they're a member of the church.
So they're in heaven, but there's like 3 layers to it.
Like purgatory.
Yes. Yes,
or
exactly.
like Catholicism.
So they're they're like in the waiting room and we're opening the door.
Damn.
Waiting room? Oh my gosh.
Just hanging out for 500
Can you imagine though just being like a conscious like soul and you're just hanging out? I just imagine like little ghosts like wiggling in in outer space just waiting to go into heaven.
Oh my
Like
God.
that's such a wild image. So, were you like growing up for me personally, I didn't really question like anything. Like things that I was just told I just would believe, and it wasn't until I met him where
I fucked all that up.
yeah, like literally like he made me look at the world different where I felt like I could question things, and I'm starting now to see like the potholes in people's stories or like the, mainstream media or whatever it is.
Greater narrative.
Did you feel the same way growing up, or did you have moments where you did start to question the religion and the stories of it?
Yeah, I think some things more than others, especially I think from a young age, especially after my parents' divorce, I was like, I don't want to get married really young. Like, I'd like to have a career. I'd like to do something. So I always kind of had like a issue with that, where I didn't like love that. I didn't swallow that easily. The baptisms for the dead, looking back, I just kind of did it. Like, it was kind of fun, honestly, because like you have this curiosity about the temple, like, your whole life, and you can never go into the temple, and like we're finally allowed to go in the temple, and it's this big sacred thing, and you're like doing temple work, like you're told you're like helping these people, and like you feel really good about it. So I think that I didn't really pick apart until later. But certain things, more like the gender role stuff, even from a young age, I was like, I don't know about all that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a thriving career when I'm older. Yeah. I'm not going to do this shit.
Yeah. Or maybe it was I was babysitting too much and I was like, I don't know about having too many children.
I can wait on premarital sex right now. These kids suck. So we talked about heaven. Do they talk about hell very much in LDS?
That's a really good question. No, not really. So the LDS do believe in a hell, but they really only believe that a few people ever, like all of time, will actually go to hell. They don't, because of the 3-tier heaven thing. So like you could be a really bad person and just go into the bottom tier of heaven. To go into hell is like, I think what they said is you have to like see God, know he's real, and like still cast him away. And that's like gets you into hell. Not any like certain sin, how like the 10 Commandments are. Hell is not this like fear-mongered thing that they use as like a weapon against you, which I actually really...
I like that.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I think of like that bottom tier of heaven. It's like, okay, you're dead. You know that heaven's here, but like you look up and you're like, there's like a VIP suite and I'm in a Motel 6. That's what I'm picturing right now. It's like, it could be better. It's cool.
Oh
Still have to work.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Still have rent due in heaven 1.
Still have to work. No retirement for you. Yeah.
That sounds brutal.
Time is like probably not a thing either, so it's just forever.
You don't get Saturdays. It goes Sunday, Monday, all the way through the week back to Sunday.
Yeah, that's horrible. That would be hell. Well, we were kind of talking about heaven and hell, and I'm curious to know like what your idea of it is, based off of what you grew up and what you were taught. Like, I think I did for a very long time imagine that heaven is this, it's like in the clouds and it's like made of gold, and not that like God is like this big white guy sitting on like a throne of clouds.
Jacked.
And he's jacked. Like not anything like that, but I just imagine that like that is what heaven might look like if it does look like anything, and hell is just floating into existence without any purpose or any other soul that's there. It's just you, not in your body.
Did I change your perspective of hell overnight?
Yes.
Like for an introvert, that sounds like heaven.
Just floating around
by yourself, doing nothing. Yeah. No, but in all seriousness, I think like heaven is up to interpretation, like what your idea of heaven is. And I think that's where I've gotten. And I honestly still do believe everyone goes to heaven except for like maybe a few. I think if you like try your hardest to just live a good life and not even be a part of any religion, I don't really believe in the idea of there's a true religion. I think just whether you're a good person or not. Like I think you do get
Fair
assessed.
Statement. Yeah.
Yeah, and that decides where you end up. But like most people are probably going to get into heaven, and maybe it goes farther from there. But I like to think that it's kind of like your own reality. Whatever your idea of heaven is, that is what heaven will be.
What's hell for you?
I love that.
Oh my gosh. I really like the 9 to 5 idea you guys had.
Pretty terrible.
Yeah, just die, and instead of eternal rest, you're just
Literally sitting right
grinding.
behind me, just on the computer, my eyes melting.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Severance. Have you seen Severance?
No, I've heard about
So
movie.
there's like your inside and your outside. Your outside is like the real person who gets to go live and never do the 9 to 5. And then during their 9 to 5, that's like their inside person.
And that's all you ever know. So your outside person never knows what it's like to work a 9 to 5. You just know that that's like another person that does that. And then your 9 to 5 only knows work. And that is their only, like, that's their life.
Oh, your like different realities.
Yes.
kind
And
of?
you like
Okay.
separate it.
But your consciousness is just like trapped at the water cooler with the guy who sucks. And you're just like, well, another day at the office.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I've heard about that show.
Season 2 actually just came out. It's really good.
There's all those memes about it, like my inside person's doing this or something. There's like all those jokes going around. Okay, that's what that was. Okay.
It's a really good show. I kind of wanted to ask about the tithing. I feel like we didn't talk about that quite yet. When it comes to the tithing, is it 10% of your income that you are giving? And how strict are they when you are not able to give 10%? What does that look like? What do you know, like what the church is doing with that money? Like what is that? What's the financial situation going on?
Tithing's such an interesting topic, and I'm glad you brought it up. So I think there is like anything we're talking about, there's pros and cons to it. It teaches you discipline, responsibility. Like I had to pay tithing when I was 11 years old from my babysitting job. Like
Really?
you have to pay tithing immediately, 10% of your income.
They get their money.
Yeah.
Damn.
Which looking back, I'm like, oh, I wish now that I'm not practicing anymore, I wish there was like a way I could get that money back. Cause it was probably like hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Cause like I worked all throughout high school. I babysat from the age of like 11 to 15. Like I was out there fucking, sorry. I was out
Slaving
there,
away.
I was out there grinding
Yeah.
from a young age, and I did pay tithing. Like my parents had me pay tithing. They paid tithing. It was like the norm. It wasn't questioned. 10% is a lot, especially when you think about the church as a demographic, and there's a lot of lawyers and doctors and people that make a lot of money that are LDS, and they're giving 10% of their income to the church.
Question about
That's
the tithing
crazy.
with that 10%. Is that pre or post tax?
That's a good question, because I only paid it from like when I wasn't really getting it's actually, yeah, I don't know how to answer that.
Okay, because picture you're making 80 grand a year.
Yeah.
So you're giving 8 grand. But then on top of
Yeah.
that, like the state's taking money from you, the feds,
Yeah,
and you
so
have a
is it
10%.
like-
Is it from the big bucket or after the
That's
fact?
a really good question. I've never thought about that because, and I probably knew in high school, but I don't remember. But, and I see Kenzie's looking it up.
Tithing can be done before or after taxes, so it's a
okay.
personal decision.
Because it is a tax write-off too.
Yes,
So
it can be a tax write-off.
it's probably from gross, so you can write that 10% off. It's already built into the system. They've got it down.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. So that makes sense. Like before or after, that makes sense. But a big thing about tithing is it's a fundamental rule. So if you don't pay your tithing, again, you can't go into the temple. You can't get married in the temple. You can't go into the temple to see your sister get married or your daughter. You can't do temple work. It's not like as much of an issue as like you sinned and you can't do those things. Like if you're going through financial trouble and you can't pay your tithing, It happens, and you talk to your bishop about it, and they make they make exceptions, but they're also like, I'm really sorry, but you can't go into the temple.
That's brutal.
My mom was actually told that.
That's brutal.
Yeah. When my parents got divorced and she had, like, her income got all messed up, she was told that, okay, that's okay, but, like, you can't do temple work right now. And, like, that made her really sad and really
Get your
upset.
bread up, and then you can come in.
Yeah.
That's crazy. It seems like, though, they do use the money for good for the most part. I think that you were telling me that they do like stock investments, which
Yeah, they invest that money.
Yeah,
And they put it
which is
into real
interesting.
estate so that it can turn into more money for the church.
yeah, I just think it's funny. I don't know why that's funny to me.
Yeah. They do a lot with it, and there's a lot of controversy with it. Like those church member or leaders I was talking about, like, how much does the prophet get paid? How much does the prophet get paid?
Right,
Does he have like a
right.
company credit card that he uses? Like,
Probably.
and people, there's no clear answers on this. And I've looked into it a little bit, and there's lots of opposing information about this, but who really knows? And that's why I'm not going to say it's this way or that way, because, like, I can't prove anything, but you can speculate. That being said, the church does have a lot of money, and churches can't be taxed by our government. And I think that's where it gets a little dicey.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think maybe there should be a tax for churches when you're acting like a business.
Yeah, 100%. But even like with your mom not being able to go because, you know, of the situation that was going on with her and your dad, wouldn't the church like be like, oh, we'll help you with your mortgage, or we'll help you with rent, or whatever it is? Like, was that ever offered to your mom?
That's a good question. Honestly, it depends on who your bishop is. So another important thing is, like, growing up, we had a really good bishop, and then a couple years later, we had a really terrible bishop who a lot of people had an issue with, and actually ended up like requesting to switch wards, didn't want to be around him.
Wow.
Damn.
And he was just very strict and not accommodating and very judgmental and just not really a nice, accommodating, empathetic person.
Yeah.
I see why they made him a bishop, because he was very loyal and faithful, and like he was a good member of the LDS Church, but not as in a leadership role. So him being bishop, he had, like, if someone came to him and said, I'm having trouble paying rent, can you help me? He is kind of like the financial manager for his ward. So he can say, he usually will say yes, but he can be like, only this much, versus like what they might actually need. Because then it looks better for him, his ward needing less financial support, up to like the higher ups. So it's, again, it's like a business. So they will help you, and they are there for you, and will help you buy groceries. And there's grocery stores where are run by the LDS Church, where you can go in and get everything you need. They'll give you rent money and all this stuff, but like, it's like case by case, bishop by bishop, ward by ward, community by community.
Very interesting. The what was it called that my grandma was? She had a job working. I want to say it was like food storage, which I didn't realize this, but growing up, I remember my grandma having like a little workout room to the side of her garage, and every time I would go in there, there was dry goods up the ante in there. And I never I just always thought like
6 months.
Yeah,
Everybody in your household.
but I didn't realize like why. And my aunt and my mom last night were actually talking about how she would work there, and they would always tell you to keep at least like 6 months food for the end of days. But you're constantly switching out that food because eventually it does expire. So did you guys have like a pantry full of dried goods?
Oh yeah, a pantry in the garage everywhere. We had so many of those bins, those like big metal bins, like a giant soup can, it looks like.
Yeah.
All different types of food. And I think that's another core LDS belief, is they believe that, you know, Jesus will come again. The second coming is going to happen at some point, and we need to be ready, because the world's going to, you know, go into chaos. And that's why they store all that food and have all those things. But
Why would the world go into chaos though?
That's part of, so like in the Christian fundamental belief, the return of God marks the end of times. And so in Christianity, you can ascend into heaven if you're worthy. and those who aren't stay and basically get to deal with the plague and all of the outcomes of the world falling apart.
So you still die.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the end of time, and they think it's gonna happen like when humanity like can't be saved, like almost when the flood came and people were just so evil and corrupt that God was like, Noah,
I'm going to power wash society.
I mean, exactly. Yeah. And so that's like the second coming is when the world has become so corrupt. It's like the end of days where there's little worthy people left of faith. So Jesus is going to come and get them and pretty much leave with them. And the rest of everyone is like on the end of time, the end of the world.
That's scary.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that, so they didn't make hell a scare tactic, but the second coming of Christ was everyone gnarly.
Not to be looked forward to.
Yeah, it was like shocking. And you store food for it. You prepare like it could happen at any minute, and you're like on the edge of your seat like, oh my gosh, am I worthy enough to ascend heaven with Jesus and God when they come? And like, it's chaos, like, it's scary.
Imagine the world falling apart. Like, you want to make sure that you've got your...
Well, the world already feels like it's on the brink of falling apart with all the natural disasters that are happening.
I don't know. I feel like since November, things have gotten a lot better. Since January 20th, things continue to get better. I don't know why.
Because I turned 28.
Yeah, that's why. Definitely.
God's just blessing the world now.
So one of my best friends from 5th grade to freshman year of high school, and then we kind of separated because I was the naughty kid that was not following the Lord. His family, so I grew up in Granite Bay, and very wealthy Mormon family. They had 7 children, and their basement was like a mini grocery store because they had stocked up for their entire family for 6 months. And I remember we'd play hide and seek in his house. And the basement was scary because it was just like the literal aisles of food. And it blew my mind. I was like, how do you guys like cycle through all this? How's this not rotting away?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's a lot. Even when my mom had to move and stuff, like we'd go through it time and time again, and it's heavy, it's bulky, and like it expires and it gets dusty, and it's a whole thing. It's a lot. It's intimidating.
You're like, are we gonna cook this ever?
Yeah, and they let it go. They usually like, it's like dried out, it's nothing you would like want to eat. Like it probably goes to waste in most cases. Like you throw it away and you buy more.
Yeah.
Which is kind of sad in its own way.
Right.
The Mormons are keeping Costco alive. So
honestly, yeah.
Or giving it to the homeless. Like, wasn't that a thing that they would do?
Yeah, I think some people probably do. If you're more organized and you stay on top of when stuff's going to expire, hopefully that's more of the norm.
Like, you need to eat this right now.
Yeah.
It's
you
going
have
to
1 week.
Well, I would love to kind of round out this podcast with just a couple like personal questions of just things that you either took away that you still instill in your life, and then also things that maybe you've had to unlearn from the Mormon Church that have taken a while. So we'll start with maybe the first one. What's like a teaching that you still incorporate in your daily life? Something that holds true to you still?
I think like the idea of being inclusive and just being kind to everyone. And I think I had the church member I was talking about earlier who I really loved in Young Woman's. She always, why we had such a good relationship, and she was so loving, nice. She always was like, Emily, like, you're very inclusive. Like, you try and include everyone. And like, if there's someone that's like more shy, or like if we were doing an activity or something, like she's like, you're not cliquey, you're nice to everyone. And I always took that as such a compliment. And I've always tried to like live up to that and keep being that person.
Yes.
So I'd say
you very much are. You are like the one, like
it's so sweet.
The community of friends that I feel like you and both Max like have created. Like, you bring people together. It makes people feel good, and you create a community of your own, which probably stems a lot from the teachings of the church. Yeah,
definitely. And just being kind to everyone. And I think I learned that more on my way out. Seeing how a lot of friends treated me differently and were kind of judgy or more cliquey. and just how that affected me, I kind of took that in, internalized it, and was like, I don't want to be like that or be judgy. So that's another thing, is like controlling my thoughts. Try and like think good about other people too, and like even watch just the way I think.
And what are you leaving? What are you ditching? And you can stay with that. That's not for me.
It's a good question. Probably, oh my gosh, I don't know. There's so many things. I'm trying to like think of a specific one. Being judgmental, and being too harsh on yourself, I guess. A lot of self-judgment and basing your self-esteem on trying to be perfect and be this certain person, or meeting this standard, I guess, and not everyone's perfect. And I guess too, like, this is a random one, but the no coffee thing is so silly.
So silly.
It's so silly. Like, you guys love coffee, you know.
Addicted to
I would not, I couldn't
great.
be Mormon because of that rule.
Yeah,
Like,
and
there would be no way.
it's a deal breaker for honestly a lot of people. The alcohol thing, people are like, okay, like I see that. I also obviously love my craft beer and my IPAs
Yeah.
now as well. But the coffee one, because like when I went to UNR, I got a degree in nutrition, and we learned like the benefits of caffeine. Like, it's natural. Like, coffee beans come from the earth, and having like a cup of black coffee in the morning has a lot of benefits.
Yeah.
And I think why I have so many gripes about them not letting you drink coffee is because of how much soda they drink.
Right. That never made sense to me, especially in the show, when apparently there's like a bunch of soda pop places in Utah, and they go there in the morning. Like, you know how you would go for like a cup of coffee, espresso, cappuccino in the morning,
Yeah.
which is like the best environment ever. And then they just go to this soda shop, and
It's like, yeah, it's weird.
and it's still caffeine.
Is it?
Yeah.
Soda? Diet, yes.
Soda does not always have to have caffeine. Root beer.
Most of the sodas they drink. So like the most popular being Coca-Cola and Dr. Pepper. Those are probably like, of all the LDS people I know, like that's like my sister drinks that, my mom drinks that. I used to work at a law office that had a lot of LDS like members at this law office in Las Vegas, and the main lawyer I worked for, who's a partner, I'd go into his office at 8 a.m. and he'd have a Diet Coke cracked. So there is non-caffeinated sodas, but it's mostly Coke and Dr. Pepper.
The devil's juice.
It's just crazy to me, because also soda is so much worse for you
So much worse.
than a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't really understand
Drinking like 2 or 3 sodas will like, you can get more caffeine very easily by drinking soda over coffee.
that. Like espresso martinis, how am I supposed to have espresso martinis or not have espresso? I guess I wouldn't be drinking alcohol if I was Mormon. So that would make sense. Okay, last question, or maybe I have a couple questions I need to look, but I want to know from your perspective, any advice that you can give someone who may be questioning their faith currently, and what you recommend that they do.
I would say do what's best for you, and time will pass and everything will be okay. And it's more important for you to make decisions based on your own long-term happiness. And you're going to have to disappoint people, and that's going to be really hard. But at the end of the day, it's your life. And once you do it, you can start moving forward in the right direction, and just not try and get good at saying no and setting boundaries. And just you got to put yourself first, and you're going to disappoint people, and that's okay.
Great advice.
That is great advice. Yeah. I was like listening to that for myself too, of like, because I think a lot of people, what they do with faiths like this, where it's so strong and very rigid, is a lot of their identity becomes swept up in it. So when you end up leaving or you're questioning it, you're almost questioning like, who are you? What do I stand for? What do I believe in? And I don't think it's just faith. I think it's like anything that you're very involved in, whether it's, like my dad played football his whole life, and he was kind of like relating to my mom in the sense of like, you were trying to please God, I was trying to please my coach. So I think like your identity can be categorized in different things other than faith.
And it's who you put in in that power position in your mind, who you're trying to please. You're externalizing whatever that agency is.
Like,
I like that. Yeah.
be careful who you put on a pedestal, I
Yeah.
think is what you said.
Yeah.
Which, like, that's anybody in your life, right?
Yeah.
Like, whether
People
it's like
don't belong on pedestals.
No.
They're people.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
famous people.
Yeah.
No, I really like that. That's a good think about who's on the pedestal. Is it yourself or is it someone else?
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
And then my final question. Are you ever going back?
I'll drink to that.
If you're just listening to this and not watching it
No.
on YouTube, Emily's holding a hazy little IPA.
Oh my gosh.
So no, you are
No.
not going
Yeah.
back.
No,
Okay.
no.
Do you get visited?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't, but a lot of people do. My brother does. It's really funny because he's always like, "Who gave my address to the missionaries?"
Yeah.
And, like we're all like, "None of us did." So the other reason I kept saying like we do this when talking about LDS, again, it's like kind of a habit, and like it was a community I was a part of, and again, I don't hold any like really ill will or hatred towards them. So I think that's why I'm okay saying we. I was a part of
Yeah.
that discourse. I still have respect for that discourse. But another thing too is when my dad left the church, he had to, you can't just like stop being LDS. It's a whole process and it's very difficult. You have to go to Utah and like do a bunch of paperwork and you have to do it in person. So you have to fly to Utah and have your name removed from the records, essentially is like what it's called.
Wow.
And you're pretty much unbaptizing yourself at that point where they can't contact you. You're no longer registered as a member of their church. So it's like, it's a big like schism. It's a big act.
Wow.
I've
You really
never
have to
done
commit
it.
to that if you're going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, like to be motivated to go and do that. And I know some people have besides my dad, like you have ill will. You don't want to be associated with the church. You don't want the missionaries to come find you. It's a whole thing. And I totally respect if people have had, everyone is valid to their own experience. And I know people have had really bad, nasty experiences in the Mormon church. So if you feel like that's going to give you closure, totally respect it. I just never, I'm lazy. That's too much work.
It's a lot of work to go there and
is
fill
a
out
lot of work.
paperwork to be like, I'll take a meeting and go, no, thank you.
Yeah, but for some reason, they don't have my most updated address.
Well, now they will.
Oh my gosh. I know, maybe they'll come find me now. Who knows? But like they know where my brother lives and I don't know how they figure it out. They have ways.
They're tapped in.
Yeah.
I don't know how, but they
They have little detectives online going through the records of
maybe
where
they
everyone is.
buy like public information.
Yeah, probably.
They do really like to seek out ex-members because that's like a quick conversion if they can say the right thing, you know? I will say like be kind to missionaries when you can. Like they can be pushy.
Yeah.
And it is a lot. But at the end of the day, they're 19, 20-year-old girls or boys and they grew up in this and sometimes they don't want to be there again. Like a lot of missionaries don't even want to be there. So you really just give them a glass of water, be straightforward and be like, please don't, like, just be kind. I know a lot of people are not kind to them. So
Yeah, no, that's really good advice actually, because I think a lot of people can be like, stop knocking on my door.
yeah, it's hard. It's like doing cold call sales. Like it's not fun.
That's why they're so good at sales. That's why I'm like, I respect what you're doing. I see what you're doing. Not for me, but carry on.
Yeah, it's the farm.
Well, thank you, Emily, for sharing your experience and being vulnerable and just articulating the Mormon, like the reality of the Mormon church or LDS church just so well. I feel like I learned a lot just from this conversation, and I think it will be really valuable to people who are interested in learning about it.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. This was awesome. Happy to be here.